I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone joining us for today's Bussola Institute webinar, Accelerating the Transformation, Technology, COVID and the Future of Work. As we come to the end of 2021, with the second anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic already on the horizon, I want to begin today by briefly looking back to the pre-COVID era to reflect on where we thought the future of work might bring us at that point. The Bussola Institute has been actively looking at a range of key issues around the future of work in Europe and the Gulf since 2018. Among other issues, we examined the impact of the fourth industrial revolution and its potentially enormous consequences for tomorrow's labour markets. The fourth industrial revolution is already fundamentally changing, not alone the way we work, but also the way we live and interact with each other. Millions of people are now connected remotely by mobile devices with unprecedented capacity and processing power. Incredible advances in areas including artificial intelligence, robotics, and nanotechnology are creating seemingly endless possibilities. But serious economic and social challenges for the way that we will work and live in the future. Into this already complex and uncertain equation arrived the unexpected and unwelcome guest, COVID-19. Since early 2020, we've all been grappling with the impacts of the pandemic, and nowhere has this been more evident than in the world of work. The pandemic disrupted labour markets throughout the world, and millions of people have lost their jobs or had to adjust to working from home. Its broader economic consequences have further intensified the challenges already evident before the advent of COVID-19. We urgently require more creative approaches to post-pandemic employment in a scenario where remote working has become normalised, and reimagining the workplace to accommodate hybrid models of working has become a key issue. How best can we adapt to the impact of both the digital revolution and the pandemic in relation to future skills development? And how do we ensure that we use all of the human talent available to us in the post-pandemic world of work by further progressing the situation of women in the workplace? In a fast emerging world where unprecedented technological innovation can bring long-term gains in productivity, open new markets, and drive economic growth, how can we ensure that these important developments will not increase inequalities, but instead provide opportunities to create a more inclusive and human-centered future? In addition, we must ask what implications will these changes have on social protection measures for the future? We are delighted to have a hugely experienced and highly distinguished panel with us today to explore these interconnected issues from a range of perspectives, coming from political, academic, and expert consulting backgrounds. Before I introduce my first guest, I just want to say that all of our distinguished panelists come to us today with wide experience and an extraordinarily long and impressive CV. So I'm only proposing, as I introduce each one, to highlight one or two aspects of their many, many achievements. And our first guest today, our first panelist, will be Anna Diamantopoulou. Anna is a former EU Commissioner for Employment, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities. She has held several significant ministerial portfolios in the Greek government. She is also the president of the Athens-based think tank Dictio. Anna was just recently appointed as chair of the very important EU HighLevel Group on the future of social protection and the welfare state. You're most welcome, Anna. It's great to see you. My first question, Anna, just to begin with, maybe to talk about your latest appointment. My congratulations, of course, on your appointment as chair of the High-Level European Expert Group, which will study the future of social protection and the welfare state, its financing, and interconnections with the changing world of work. Can you very briefly outline for us what you regard as the role and purpose of this high-level group and its implications for the future of work in the EU?
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for this invitation. And it is an honor for me to participate in this panel with very distinguished people. Concerning the high-level group and its role, I think it is important to say that the European Commission has decided since June to put in place an action plan on social issues. It is called the social pillar. And it is obvious that we need it because there is a huge impact in the labor market and in the social protection systems. So this high-level group brings together 12 of the best expertise at the European level from many different countries, universities, research centers. Maybe we had to have somebody from companies, but we can work with them. And they have an outstanding expertise in social protection, welfare practices, in connection with taxation, with financing, with demography, etc. So the mandate of the high-level group, I would like to say it in a very few words, is how we can make social protection fit with the new world. We're planning to take into consideration the megatrends, of course, because all megatrends have an impact in the social protection and welfare systems and the labor market, first of all. And of course, to take into account the COVID pandemic and the lessons which already have been learned at the European level. So the high-level group will have the challenging but very important mission to reflect on how to reinforce social protection in the light of megatrends. So it means that we need data, and we do not have data everywhere, and to recognize, to identify the social risks, the new social risks under these megatrends. I will speak about them in a minute. And then to see if these new risks are covered by the social protection systems, or if not, what we need to do. And of course, the most important issue is the financing, because this is a huge issue, and there we have to make many changes. So what are these megatrends? I think everybody could easily identify them. It is the demographic change, which in Europe is resulting in shrinking workforce and an aging population. It is the transformation of the labor market accompanying the digital and green transition. And of course, it is the increase in non-standard forms of work. Finally, it is globalization, which emergencies, new risks, but when we talk about globalization, we understand that it's everything from digital to climate change, but of course, in very important issues like taxation. So all the above have an impact in nations' ability to offer a sustainable and effective framework of social protection. And hence, we need to think, to plan, design new approaches and new solutions. And I think this is our big challenge, how to be innovative on this. So I would like just to give some, I'm going to, in a few seconds for each one, to give an idea of what is the impact for the time being at European level, so to understand why this work is very important and it is very urgent. So concerning demography, just to say that the working age population, aged from 18 to 64, is projected to shrink by 18% by 2017. So from 20 million people so from 265 million workers to 220 million if there are no changes. So what is the result? The result is a negative impact in the economy, and of course, there will be an impact in the social protection, to how we can fund social protection systems. Concerning the changing world of work, I think it is interesting to tell you something which happens for first time in Europe in this decade, a new reality. And this is that in 22, around 40% of employment in the European Union is not a traditional full-time permanent contract as was the case before, a permanent contract between, of course, an employee and an employer. And this share is higher than 40% in 6 member states. So it is crucial to find ways that all forms of work contribution, all these new forms, the platform, the click workers, the crowded workers, every kind of new model has to contribute to social protection, as this could help to sustain finances. Moreover, revenue from sources other than labor could gain a major role at the European level, as the share of labor is overall, the share of labor income is overall is declining. Mm-hmm. Finding new sources of funding social protection would be the key for the future of European level. Now, concerning the green transition, we know that there is an impact, but for the time being, we do not have enough data. So there are many ideas about a million of jobs were going to be lost, or there are some projections that we're going to have millions of new jobs, but we do not have reliable data on this. And of course, concerning the climate change, we already have the problem of energy poverty, which is one of the major issues at European level. Finally, concerning the COVID pandemic impact, again, I will give you an some piece of interesting data at the European level. On the one side, I think we succeeded in having the at risk of poverty rate at stabilizing the risk of poverty at risk of poverty people. We stabilized it between 2019 and 2020, which was really a success because you know that we have lockdowns and the situation in the economy was terrible. On the other side, there was a huge increase in social budgets. So it from 19 to 20, it went 80% up. Sure. And of course, this cannot be the same in the future. So on the one side, okay, we went very well. On the other side, we have to work in different kind of social protection systems in order to be resilient and to be financed. Thank you.
Great, Anna, that was fantastic. And it gives us a very clear picture of what indeed your high-level group will be doing. Our second panelist today will be Dr. York Schubert. And York is a senior partner with McKinsey & Company based out of Dubai. He's the global head of economic development, public sector practice at McKinsey. And among the wide range of other issues that York has vast experience in include economic development, government transformation, and human resource development. York, you're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know that in assessing the disruptive impact of new technologies on the future of work, you've looked at the fundamental shift to technological, social, and emotional skills that will be needed for the future. Can you, and I'll use the word again briefly, if possible, tell us more about your work in this area, particularly in relation to the specific skill sets and talents that we will need in order to navigate the future world of work? Over to you, York.
Thank you, John, and a pleasure to be here. I'm very passionate about the topic of labor market and skilling and employment. And I just wanted to give you a bit of a highlight of some research that we've been running over the past 5-6 years. When companies initially approached us on digitization projects, the immediate afterthought was, how do I retrain my staff to adjust and adopt to the new work environment, to the new processes? And of course, now if you aggregate that at a societal level, at labor market level, we can understand that this brings enormous changes. And we started our initial research by thinking about how many jobs are going to get lost through automation. And then this was a very, very big number. But then continued also to understand what are the jobs that may be created due to technological disruption and automation. And now we're trying to double click a little bit more what happens in the transition. And I cannot claim that we have the final answer, but I wanted to share some initial findings of our research. And because I'm a consultant, I brought some PowerPoint slides, and I'll just quickly share the screen. Can you see it?
Yeah, can indeed.
So as we are thinking, just one second, I need to. As we are thinking about technological disruption, we know right now, we broke down basically different occupations and different activities at a job level, and try to understand what is automatable right now and what is not. And we know already that 50% of today's work activities are automatable with existing technologies. Now, that doesn't mean that in reality they do get automated. So the adoption curve is different from country to country, but that is already doable with our current day technology. Now, that has a huge promise in terms of productivity growth and potential income per capita growth that you could capture. But at the same time, we also realize that about 1/3 of the OECD workers may need to change their occupation from a job that is present right now to a job that may not even exist. And this transition, of course, this is where it links to Anna's description of the social systems to support the transition and make sure that this transition works seamlessly. Now, the interesting thing, though, is when we talk about automation, there's only 1% of occupations that will completely go and that will be 100% automatable. In fact, most jobs have different elements, have different activities that become automatable. So the key message here is most jobs are not going to go away. Most jobs will change in their nature, depending on the kind of skills that are required for the different jobs. And then if we aggregate all of this together, what we will see is and this is a breakdown. On the left-hand side, you see it's 2018 data before pandemic, where the percentage of how much time is spent on basically different cognitive skills. And we then see that in the next 10 years, how that will change. And you will see that you need much less physical and manual skills, much less basic cognitive skills, because that will all be replaced by technology. But then it comes to social and emotional skills and technological skills that we require much more of those in the future job profiles that we're looking at. And so the last year we did then some research and say, what does that actually mean? And how do we define these skills, and what is the taxonomy that we could use? And we are suggesting in our latest piece of research a taxonomy. We called it Delta. It's distinct elements of talent. The reason that we did that is it's more than skills. It's behaviors. It's attitudes. It is different qualifications in addition to a skill set. Now, there are different taxonomies around, and I cannot claim that this is the ultimate one. But what we try to do is we try to collect all the research that has been done, and to define a base layer of what we would call future skills. These are not technical job-specific skills. This is, if you will, the foundation to adopt to new requirements. It's the foundation to learn. It's the foundation for many of the new occupations that will be created in the future. And so you'll see we have different buckets of cognitive skills like critical thinking, communication, but also mental flexibility. We have self-leadership, so everything around grit, entrepreneurship, self-awareness and self-management. We'll have interpersonal skills, right? Developing relationship, mobilizing and leading others, as well as certain digital skills, which become, if you will, the foundation to navigate a future digital environment. Now, we are at a point right now where we are pressure testing this. So we ran surveys, we tried to understand what are differences between different countries, what are differences between different population groups. So it's different between men or women being assessed against this grid. We did this as self-assessment. We also are trying to do it at a company level. And I think the research is ongoing, and I don't think we have any definitive answers there. But it is very interesting now to take this taxonomy and start developing, if you will, modules, reskilling journeys, ideally digital, to actually train these specific elements of talent, to train this behavior, to train these skills. And so we're working with some school systems right now, trying to understand how can we get as many of these modules embedded in their curriculum and in their training plan. And I think in the discussion we can share a little bit more of what that journey could potentially look like.
Great. Thank you so much, York. That is great. And we're coming at this whole issue today, as I said at the beginning, from different perspectives. And, you know, we had Anna's perspective, yours, and now I go for a different one again to Dr. Na Fu. And Professor Na Fu is an associate professor at the Trinity Business School, in a very prestigious Trinity College, Dublin. She is an expert in human resource management and is the co-director of the Trinity Centre for Digital Business. Na and her team have been doing some extraordinarily interesting work in relation to people working from home, the hybrid model of working for the future, and so on. You're most welcome, Na, and maybe just to take a slightly different aspect of your work, of the future of work. An aspect of your recent work in Trinity has been focused on human resource management post-COVID. And the key issues that emerged from this research included communication, infrastructure, well-being, leadership. In this context, what has COVID shown you and shown us about good or bad human resource management, and what implications does this have for the future of work?
Thank you very much, John. It's such a great honor to be here to share about my research with a distinguished expert panel on the hybrid working, future work. I don't know if we can still call it a post-COVID, because it seems like we're going to living with it. Yeah. But it's lovely to share about a few ideas and also findings from my research during the COVID. So to start with that, that when the COVID came, and I think give you a little bit of scenario that I'm sure York and Anna and Leila also saw this. A lot of companies actually, at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns, a lot of companies have seen productivity boost, improved productivity rather than reduced. So when lockdown, maybe people have more time, save more commuting time, and use that time for working. So people working long hours, that's where you see the productivity, going up at the beginning of the pandemic. But 1 year in the, in the COVID, actually, there are, few changes. Well, according to a recent report by Microsoft, the Work in a Trend Index report, they found, a lot of people are struggling, where, there are probably 40% of leaders are struggling. And we thought parents with the homeschooling would be struggling. Actually, is the people who are single, 67% are struggling. In the same report, they also find that 40% of people are thinking about quitting their jobs. And in a few months later, in August this year, PwC has a report saying that actually, 67%, let me get that, 65% of employees are, thinking about changing a new job. So this is called, I think it's some people call it a reshuffling. reshuffling, people are thinking or reflecting why I'm working, why I'm doing this, doing my job. Or some people labeled it as a great resignation. People, maybe have maybe burnout, maybe some other reason, and then they just want to get a new job. So this is the few changes during the COVID from the employees. Coming back to my research, and because a key reason for people changing job is the burnout, I would like to find out what practices organization can take and to improve employee well-being. So I have surveyed thousands of employees, and I would like to share two takeaways, two key findings from it. The foremost, most important factor I found in my research, a key driver for improving employee well-being and resilience, is actually the participation. Is people, employees or workers, they think they can be part of a decision making. They can see, they can speak up. They can have their voice to be heard by the management, so that they are part of organization. They can see the whole picture. You may say, yes, we do employee survey, we do all those sorts, but actually, during the COVID, a lot of decisions have been communicated top down. If you think about that, we're going to implement this, we're going to implement that. And how many organizations really spend time to explain the rationale behind it? How many organizations, communicate with the employees? This is what you said. This is what we had. You see, the communication from management is missing. Is that it's not a dialogue. It's a communication top down, and where the participation of the employee is missing. So participation definitely is really the first factor. During the COVID or post-COVID, or in any changes context. The second, as John, you may ask about the leadership. In some research already says that direct leadership during the crisis, basically giving people clear orders, when people are facing great uncertainty, is great. But in my research, actually, because it's a global pandemic, we need some leaders to share empathy. This is also showing in George's presentation, the empathy, the social skills of leaders is important. So I call them, empathy-based leader and function-based leader. But actually, it's not one is better than the other. It's a combination of both, which I label as a paradox. For example, if you are a results-driven manager, how could it be also empathy-based? Actually, you can do both. So when we see managers spend some time to care about their employees, their followers, and also to get job done, not rather just do one. That paradox leadership is, shows the significant impact to improve employee well-being, to reduce that perceived social isolation. To sum up, involving employees and having our managers being paradox navigators to get the job done, but also show a sincere concern to our people.
I think we can all learn from that now. So thank you very, very much for sharing that with us. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Leila Hatit, and Leila is the Managing Director and Senior Partner with the Boston Consulting Group. She is a specialist in human capital topics and is the global lead of Boston Consulting Group's education, employment, and welfare sector. Leila is an expert on women's economic empowerment. And leading from that, Leila, my first question is that even before the pandemic, progress towards gender equality in the workplace had been pretty uneven. Despite progress in many areas over recent years, the status of women in some workplaces around the world remains of great concern, and much still needs to be done to equally include men and women. Now, looking towards the future of work going forward from the pandemic, how can we make further progress and avoid losing the gains that we've already made?
Thank you very much, John. So looking into the future, COVID has already accelerated the changes to the workforce, and with higher technology adoption rates and the impact that has had on the global economic growth. We published a report this year called "The Future of Jobs in the Era of AI." which looked at detailed analysis of job markets in the US, in Germany, in Australia, all of which will face looming shortfalls when it comes to computer-related occupations and jobs in science, in technology, in engineering, and mathematics. So just for a moment, what a great opportunity that would be if we could fill all this talent gap with women. But of course, there are many challenges, and there are challenges that were brought on by the pandemic. So some of this has been mentioned before. The pandemic has brought challenges to gender equality. We had a BCG survey of caregivers where we asked 19,000, sorry, of employees, where we asked more than 19,000 employees in Germany, Japan, and the US. And what they said, those who take care of children or aging parents are 1.4 times more likely to say that they are very worried about their future at work and their well-being overall than those who don't have these responsibilities. Now, you can imagine that the larger share of that burden of caretaking falls on the shoulder of women. Now, in terms of the region, when you compare the region here, the MENA, with all the regions in the world, MENA is still the worst region, or it has the furthest to go when it comes to gender parity. GCC countries have made a lot of progress, but they lag behind when it comes to economic participation of women. So the UAE last year ranked 135 out of 156, Saudi 149 out of 156 countries. They've both made headways. They've both made a number of initiatives, like the UAE has introduced a law on equal pay, a law on women on boards of companies, which are great. Saudi has launched employment support programs like Qura for childcare, like Wusul for transportation. But there's still a way to go. And so what we need companies to step in and focus on diversity and inclusion in the workplace on several levels. We need them to focus, obviously, and some of it was mentioned by Dr. Na, but we need to focus on recruitment, and there we need to be bold, set targets, targeted recruitment drives and targets, even if they're temporary, until you achieve what you need to achieve. We need to focus on retention by launching policies around flexibility, flexible work wherever, whenever you want to work, networks and policies that support working women, like sponsorship, advancement, supporting advancement opportunities very formal and very visible in the organization, leadership, making diversity and inclusion a business priority and enabling it throughout the organization, involving leaders as champion to drive the agenda. I know at BCG a couple of years ago, we decided to add as one of our KPIs in our annual assessment of our partners, of our leaders, KPI on how inclusive do you think this person is. So every team member answers this question, and it's part of of your assessment. We also need to focus on structural changes at national level. So we need new and improved national policies, such as paid family leave, where both partners take time off, and not just the woman. This is a critical part of the solution to the crisis. But since this could take quite some time to effect those changes, we need the companies to step in and support the caregiving employees, both to retain them and to enable others to enter the workforce. A couple of other things I will mention. We need to, somebody mentioned we're still not out of COVID. We need to prioritize keeping the schools open and childcare open over the next month and year, particularly as we face those new variants, whenever we can, because this is critical to support women to help them remain in the workforce, because the additional load of distance learning on mothers has been extremely large. We heard in one of our caregiving surveys that 20% of mothers and 15% of fathers in the US and in Europe felt that their managers did not understand what they were going through at home during the pandemic. And so going back to Dr. Na's point on empathy and understanding, we need much more empathy, much more understanding moving forward. And finally, we need, and going back to what Dr. York was mentioning, we need to focus and encourage and retain women in STEM careers to support the future demand. So the future is very much going to be, a big part of it's going to be around STEM roles. This is going to be the lifeblood of the economy. And although women make up 39% of the global workforce, they only represent 25% of the STEM workforce worldwide. So as you see these jobs continue to grow, you can see the gap, if we don't do something very urgently, continue to exacerbate. So this is a really urgent call to action when it comes to STEM skilling of women in particular.
That's great, Leila. Thank you so much. Now, we've had 4 extremely good and very interesting and detailed introductory answers. I just ask for the next round, we can keep the answers a little bit shorter. We'll just get to maybe a little bit more. arising from what the others have all said, and indeed you said yourself at the beginning, Anna, and looking at the future of work, it's a little bit like maybe crystal ball gazing at one level. We're looking through the lens of the present, but the future of work is based on an idea that things are dynamic and changing. And what are we missing in our visions about the future of work? And what do you think we need to look at that's not so obvious today? Just, a brief answer on that, please.
Can I show a photo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jihan? That's great.
I would like just to show this photo and to explain my answer. This is a robot, and this is Aristoteles. So what York has already said, and Nu and Leila, makes obvious that we have entered an era where there is a different kind of needs concerning the working force. Having been a minister for education and lifelong learning and the commissioner for employment, combining these two, I would like in a few words to say that our educational system, if they want to prepare people for the future, they need fundamental reforms. And the basic idea is to combine Aristoteles with code. What I mean by that, on the one side, we need STEM and digital skills. So it is without saying, I mean, this is that everybody has to know for the future. On the other side, the emotional skills, the social skills, the empathy, and what York has described, which I found excellent, is what we need for the future. But this means that we have to bring in our educational systems this different kind of humanity, of theoretical studies, of philosophy, of theater, of humanistic approaches, because we will never win the machines. They will also be more, they will have always more speed and more productivity than us. But when we can win, the future of the work is on our human identity. So this is what I believe that we haven't done for the time being, and there are only a few systems in the world that have changed their approach to learning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. That's great. And a rising yard from that, Anna's kind of, what governments need to do, what ministries of education need to do. Just maybe a question for you. What can governments do to improve policies and governance in relation to creating more innovative environments for businesses to adapt to increased digitization and automation, as we were chatting about at the beginning?
Yeah. So I think there are at a system level, at the government level, I think three things that are absolutely critical. One, it is trying to speed up the adoption, because we can also see at the company level that those companies that are left behind or that adopt late will be falling behind versus those companies who are actually in the early adoption. So as a system, as a government, how can I increase adoption of technology? And that is particularly a topic, of course, for SMEs and for small companies that are struggling. See that the large companies, they have the know-how, they have the funding. It is mainly helping smaller companies and sectors adapt. That I think is the first bit. The second bit is reskilling at scale. And the interesting thing is there are a lot of efforts at a company level. So Walmart declared just a couple of years ago, they said we are as much a tech company than a consumer company. And so they retrained about 350,000 employees. to perform in the new digital environment. So there are some examples where large companies have done that. We haven't really seen a country at an education system level really in embodying it and developing a curriculum that is not only a curriculum for K-12, but also that supports ongoing learning journeys, right? So micro-credentials and continuous learning as people graduate, if you will, in their careers. So the second thing is really scaling up. They're good examples, but they still don't work really at a system level. And then the third one is, and this is where we're coming back to the social protection, it's around what to do with those left behind, right? Because we also need to acknowledge that whilst there are many, many opportunities, these opportunities may be in different geographies. They may be for different pools of talent. So what do we do with those that are actually left behind? And what is the social protection, but also the reskilling and retraining journeys for the difficult and most vulnerable groups? And I think that is particularly important as we come out of the crisis.
Thank you, York, very much. And arising from issues raised by Leila in relation to the whole issue of emotional skills, issues raised by Anna in relation to education and the broader, and just some of the issues raised now by York. The whole question of work-life balance becomes an issue. And I know that you have done research in this now. So maybe arising from your research, what advice would you give in relation to achieving a good work-life balance in the context of, indeed, maybe something we'll be doing quite a bit for a while, and that's either remote working or hybrid working?
Thank you, John. I think that's a really important question. As we talk about early on, the burnout and well-being is key issue during the whole COVID, and probably going to be really become more, much worse in the post-COVID era. So I mentioned about communication, participation. When we talk about well-being, when we talk about work-life balance, but remember, it's not only about the physical hours division. For example, you work 40 hours a week and maybe 20 hours with life. It's not only all that. In research, we have a called job demands and resource model. Basically, it means that for the well-being is a outcome of both demands and resources. Let's say if you have a job which really demanding, and then the exhaustion level is going to be likely to be high. However, if you have plenty resources, this even the demand is high, the exhaustion won't be that high. So it's a balance between resources and demands. Now come back to work-life balance as a key indicator for well-being. I would say, organization need, a lot of organizations think about physical division. Let's say some companies have done no Zoom calls or no online meetings on a particular day. I think at the beginning of our before the meeting was John O'Brien mentioned about 4.5 days working. Some companies are using, if you have an online meeting, highly strict, not more than 1 hour, maybe 50 minutes. So there's a lot of physical activities, policies in place to improve employee well-being. What I really want to emphasize is not only the physical, but it's also the psychological well-being. I think Anna mentioned about need to pay attention to this, is that future work is dynamic, is changing. But what we are really looking for is that by the end of the day, you ask yourself, why I do my job? Is just for achieve a career success, or is that you have an impact on others? So all of the companies now, kind of dive into this area to give people a purpose. Is it about the digital transformation or digital disruption, or is it about education? I think it is a combination that organizations do everything, put their people in the center by looking after, not just, let's say, giving different practice, let people work better, actually let people live better, live with a purpose. So I think companies need to, really work on towards how I'm going to give my people a purpose. that they can, even with high demands, or even they can cope with the demands, or even they may turn that demands into something personal challenge to achieve. So I think that's the goal for work-life balance.
Thank you very much, Na. Na mentioned there the whole area, Leila, of digital disruption. And indeed, we've heard a lot about digital disruption and the accelerated impact of technology throughout COVID-19 pandemic. What does it mean? And why does it have a different impact? Just to go back to maybe the earlier discussion I had with you, why does it have a different impact on women and on men?
Thank you, John. So as we've all been hearing, the new technologies like AI and others will transform the world and also the employment patterns that we see on a massive scale. So it will result, as many of you have said, in new jobs. It will result in new skills requirement for existing jobs. It will result in elimination of many jobs altogether due to automation. And these new technologies have huge potential because they can move many of those jobs today into higher skills jobs, more interesting, more motivating jobs with higher purpose potentially, but it also holds high risk for individual employees and especially for women, as you said, John. So when we look at the shifting labor market, we see that it's affecting women disproportionately. So according to one study, 11% of women's jobs today will be lost to automation compared to 9% for men. Now, you might think that 2% is not a huge difference, but when you already start with a very big gap, the WEF talks about 100 years to bridge the gender gap, this is going to set us back even more and quite significantly. And so why is that the case? Well, it's the case for a number of reasons. I think many of you are aware of. Women are underrepresented in senior management positions, which tend to be insulated from automation. They predominate in administrative jobs still today, and these are high risk of elimination. I've said it before, women are less represented in STEM roles, which are the lifeblood of the digital economy. And so that means that as those jobs grow fast over the next few years, we urgently need to address the skills, STEM skills in women. And so our research has found that skill building will be critical for companies to fix what we call their leaky STEM leadership pipeline. We have in most of the STEM focused companies, what we see is lower rates of retention and promotion for women versus men in mid-level and higher level STEM jobs. And so to improve those STEM skills and to help women advance in those STEM jobs, what we need to do is for every company to look at their efforts in terms of diversity practices and their goals, to look at the biases in the working practices. Many of these companies that are focused on STEM are male-dominated environment, and you find biases across the whole HR value chain, if you will. And so we need to focus, as said, on building those skills. The companies need to build a STEM curriculum that addresses this gap. It needs to be grounded in real work, and it needs to be suited to female employees' needs and preferences. So flexible learning at the time that works, not at the time where the children need to be picked up from school or put to bed. Promote those opportunities through the relevant channels in the relevant ways. Finally, I would say the new technologies also hold a risk in terms of representation of women in the leadership pipeline more broadly. So, for example, AI is being used more and more. And if you carelessly deploy AI in talent management, whether it's in recruiting, which more and more companies are doing excessively, but they are codified on existing biases, they will exacerbate the gap in recruiting across the organization and in leadership. So this is why it's even more important. It's so important to increase today the proportion of women we have in the development of new technologies as well.
Thank you very much, Leila. We're now running close enough to running out of time. We've about 10 minutes left, and I just need a few minutes at the end for a wrap up. I'm going to go quickly and just to ask a question, and if you can keep the answers very succinct, we may get to everybody. Leading on from what Leila has been saying, Anna, and the emphasis in relation to skills, there is a view that skills and not degrees are needed for the future of work. Should we move away from the traditional education models where acquiring a degree somehow qualifies an individual to work? Your view as a former Minister of Education, and I dare I say a former and very highly regarded Minister of Education.
Thank you.
Anna, can you hear me?
Yes, one
Yeah.
second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just have a look to this, 20 on jobs to 2028. So there are jobs which are going to be asked by the companies. In my think tank, we tried to translate it, but we couldn't. We made a very silly translation because we didn't know what it is. I mean, what is master of edge computing, quantum machine learning analyst, or cyber city analyst, or data detective. The second interesting thing I would like to show you is this. Researchers predict AI will outperform humans at many tasks. So just have a look at the first one, translating languages. How many people work now in translation or interpretation? These two photos, I have used them in order to answer to your question. Yes, we need diplomas. I don't believe that we can say no, diplomas do not matter. University degrees are important because you have a general educational level. But it must be very clear that we are not going to, your job is not going to be in accordance with your studies. So what is important for the studies? To support you in order to adjust yourself in the new needs. Coming back to the translators and to interpreters, we are going to need them. I mean, there will not be a disappearance of this occupation, but they need to do a different kind of job. So they have to work together with the machines. And this is the AI. I mean, this is the fourth industrial revolution, people and machines together. So yes, we need, it is still important to have a university degree, but again, we need the changes in our university education in order to make young people more adaptable, adjustable.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. And moving on, Jorg, again for a very brief answer, it's again in relation to skills. What, in your view, is more pressing coming out of the pandemic? Adapting skills and policies for the changing nature of work, or the social protection of workers? Or are these matters that can be addressed simultaneously?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it already a bit earlier. I think it has to be, right? First, we have to, and there's also been mentioned in the discussion that the pandemic has particularly hit more vulnerable groups in the labor markets. Yes. Particularly in the US, but also in a lot of emerging economies. And so on the one hand, to upskill and to reskill into these future jobs that we may or may not even know is absolutely critical. And so we need to create this skill building engine, and we need to create it with government support and regulatory support. But at the same time, we need to recognize that there will be some people left behind that will be struggling, right? And that may not have, the means to reskill and to requalify in this new normal. And of course, for that, we need to have a safety net and welfare interventions.
Thank you very much indeed. And now to you again for a very brief answer. I'm going back again to virtual teams working, outside the office. You recently wrote an article that I really liked entitled "Making Virtual Teams Work," in which you outlined the skills that a virtual leader, team leader needs. Would you like to maybe in about less than a minute, give us a quick summary on that, please?
Absolutely, John, will be very short. So what your teams are quite different, quite challenging because your team members couldn't see you as a full person. Sure. So the information you communicate, partly missing. So to be successful, to be a virtual leader, I think the most important is your philosophical and, practically you need to be a leader to empower, to support your people. As I said, that involve people in is that you really take people's suggestions on board. I use the word, hearing them rather than listening to them.
Yeah.
A lot of leaders are very good listeners, but that's not enough. If people raise the issues, you have to figure out and try to find the solutions. So this involves the whole mindset change. Be a leader who has a vision, who cares about your people's development, rather than a manager just caring about the task. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you, Na. And a takeaway now from Leila, in relation to, we've been talking about the acceleration in technology in the workforce, and how can we approach leveraging technology for higher growth, Leila? Just in a minute, please.
Yes, so super quickly. I mean, in so many different ways, but just three come to mind quickly.
Sure.
Number one, technology education. So education technology, we see education at a turning point with the leveraging of technology. Obviously, parents and students have suffered in the pandemic from distance learning, but if you use technology in the right way in education, it has huge potential. So that's one. Number two is also unlocking the potential of the sharing economy. So using tech platforms to help the lower income consumers to save money and then have more disposable income and more productive, be able to be more productive. So that's a second way that we can leverage technology to fuel growth. And finally, and very importantly, investing in climate innovation. We see that those companies that are investing in climate technology, climate innovation are those that are doing better, and certainly in terms of total societal return than even the big tech for in the long term. So those are three potential ways to invest in technology for the future.
Brilliant, Leila, and thanks to all of you. And unfortunately, time is our enemy. We've come to an end. And to begin with, let me express my enormous thanks to each one of you. You are all extraordinarily experienced and gifted people in the area which we were talking about today. I wish we could talk for hours about this. And thank you for bringing your considerable experience and expertise to what I regard as a very important webinar. And for sharing your insights, not alone about the way we will work in the future, but indeed the way in which we will live our lives for the future. And Europe and the Gulf come to this from different but highly complementary perspectives. And the raison d'etre for Bussola is that we act as a bridge between the Gulf and Europe. So, we feel they come with different perspectives, but at the same time, we feel that they should work and be in a position to work closely from the future. It is clear from our discussion today, I think, that both Europe and the Gulf share common objectives, collective challenges, and the possibility to benefit enormously from each other in developing, for example, joint research and collaborative actions for the future of work. The Gulf's focus on new technology has made the region a fast-growing market for 5G, AI, blockchain, and many other technologies. But as discussed today, new technologies are a disruptive force on the future of work and will require a significant shift to technological skills. Both regions need to shape this transformational change to produce excellence, diversity, and inclusion in tomorrow's labour markets. And to ensure that the digital revolution, in my view, will provide opportunities to create more inclusive and human-centred societies. I would also like, finally, to express my thanks to the large group of people who listened in and looked in on today's webinar. We're very grateful and thank you for joining us. And finally, my sincerest thanks to the Bussola team for helping me put this together. I'm so grateful to all of you. Thank you very, very much. Thanks a lot.